Hello, this video is going to be on how to do problems like J.2, characteristics of quadratic functions, equations. So I'm going to walk you through a few of these different examples. This one's telling you to find the equation of the axis of symmetry for this parabola. Now, whenever you have an axis of symmetry, you want to find, if you have a parabola, the axis of symmetry is the line that you could draw that would cut it into a reflection of itself. And the axis of symmetry will always be x equals something because it's vertical. So x is equal to something on this line. So we know that our answer is going to be x equals, and then whatever the axis of symmetry is here. So in order to figure that out, we use an equation. Remember, this is the a value, the coefficient of the x squared, whatever's in front of it. So in this case, there is none, so there's just one x squared term. A is equal to 1. Your b value is whatever's the coefficient of the x to the first degree, or just the x. So your b value in this case is equal to positive 2. And your c value is the constant, the number that's by itself, without any variables next to it. So this is your A, B, and your C. Now the formula to find the axis of symmetry, your x value will be equal to negative b divided by 2 times a. So you just use this formula and then you'll get your x value, and that will tell you what the axis of symmetry is. So negative b would be negative from the equation. B is equal to 2 divided by 2 times a. So 2 from the equation times a, and a is equal to 1. So if we simplify all of this, let's see, negative 2 divided by 2 times 1. Well, 2 times 1 is just 2. So that's negative 2 over 2, or negative 1. So we would go ahead and write here, x. Here, let me erase this so that you can see it. X equals negative 1. Nice. Okay, let's clear the screen. In order to find the y-intercept, the y-intercept of this, since this is what moves it up, this is the y-intercept. So if we were to graph this, the graph of x squared, if it was just x squared by itself, would look kind of like this, going through the origin, right? But once we add 3 to it, it moves every single point on there up. It would move this up 3, and this up 3, and this up 3, and it would end up moving the whole thing up 3. So it would look like that. So what's the y-intercept right here? Well, the y-intercept is 3. So really you just have to look at the equation in order to figure that out. Okay, let's try a harder one since we already did one with the axis of symmetry, right? The axis of symmetry for this one, well, negative b over 2a, that would just be 0 divided by 1. So this would just be 0. All right, let's try a harder level. What's the vertex of this parabola? Well, we're going to have to figure out negative b over 2a in order to find the x value of the vertex. And then we're going to have to plug that back into the equation to find the y value. So let's review how to do that. So let's see. A is 1. A is 1. what's the value in front of the x? Well, there's just one x. So b is also 1. And c, make sure you include the negative sign. That's the most common mistake. C is negative 7. So let's go ahead and figure it out. What's negative b over 2a? Negative b would be negative 1 over 2a. 2a would be 2. 2 times 1 is 2. So the x value is negative 1/2. Negative 1 over 2. Negative 1/2. Now what we get when we plug in negative 1/2 for x, that's going to give you our y value. So let's go ahead and write this equation out, but wherever we see an x squared, wherever we see an x, we're going to put in a negative 1/2 instead. So let's go ahead and write it out. Y equals x squared plus x minus 7. But remember, we said wherever we see an x, we're going to replace it with negative 1/2. So replace these with negative 1/2. Negative 1/2. And right here too, negative 1/2. All right, so negative 1/2 squared is negative times negative. A half times a half is a quarter. So this would be positive 1/4, 1 over 4, right? Negative 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, plus negative 1/2, so we could just write that as minus a half, minus 7, right? So if you think about this in terms of money, it makes it a little easier, right? Or like decimals. If you have a quarter and then you take away a $1/2, you're at negative a quarter. And then you take away another $7, you're at negative 7 1/4. So you could write this as negative, it says write them as proper fractions, improper fractions, or integers. So negative 7 1/4. If we wanted to write that as an improper fraction, well, let's see. If we had quarters and we had $7 in quarters, that would be 28 quarters. So that would be negative 4 times 7, 28 plus 1, 29 over 4. And if you don't see how I got that, you can review improper fractions, okay? So this is going from mixed numbers to improper fractions. Negative 29/4. Okay, let's try this one because we're talking about minimum values. Find the minimum value of this parabola, right? So let's think about how this parabola would look for a second, right? It would be x squared, which is just a parabola facing up, concave up, but then negative 7 would move it down 7. So what this would look like would be going like this. These should be even, but this point down here would be negative 7. So it's asking us what's the minimum value of this? Well, the minimum value, this is the lowest point. The lowest point is negative 7. All right, let's try a slightly harder one. Right, the vertex of this parabola, x squared, would just be 0, 0, because it's the original parent function. Y equals x squared. It's just like this. Oops, excuse me. That should be that should not be straight. That should be curved. Right? This is what y equals x squared looks like. This is the vertex, 0, 0. Now let's go to the next level. All right, as you can see here, it just gets a little bit tricky with the fractions. It's the same thing. We're just looking at the fractions. Now, at this point, you should realize that the y-intercept is actually just this value right here, right? Because this moves it up or down. So we don't need to change it. We just enter negative 44/5. Remember, for this vertex, you want to do x equals negative b over 2a. So negative negative 3 would be positive 3 over 2a. That would be 2 times 1. So that would be 3 over 2. And then to get the y value, you would just plug in 3 over 2 into the equation and solve for it. So let's go ahead and write it out. Y equals x squared minus 3x minus 25 fourths. And then anywhere we see an x, we're going to replace it with 3 over 2. It's right there, and right there. So this will be a positive 3 over 2. This will be a positive 3 over 2. And let's go ahead and simplify this. 3 squared is 9. 2 squared is 4. Minus, let's see, 3 times 3 will be 9. But we don't do 3 times 2 because this is like 3 over 1, right? So this is just 1 times 2. This is 9 over 2 minus 25 fourths. Now you can't subtract fractions unless they all have the same denominator. You also can't add them unless they have the same denominator. These two are the same, but how can we make this 2 into a 4? Well, what we have to do is we have to multiply this times 2 if we want to make it 4. But whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top, because when we multiply the bottom by 2 and the top times 2, we're multiplying the whole thing by 2 over 2, which is equal to just 1. And when you multiply something by 1, it doesn't change it. It just changes what it looks like. So let's rewrite this and do the subtraction. 9 over 4 minus 18 over 4 minus 25 divided by 4. Nine minus 18 would be negative 9, minus 25 would be negative 9 over 4. That's this first part right here, right? And then minus 25 over 4. Well, when you're subtracting two things, think of it like you owe someone $25 and you owe someone $9. So you owe a total of $34. Negative 34 over 4. Now, does it say we need to simplify it? Simplify both coordinates and write them as proper fractions, improper, or integers. Since these are both even, we can divide them both by 2. So that would give us negative 17 over 2. All right, finding the maximum value of this parabola. So remember that the maximum value, the minimum and maximum, the maximum value of this parabola, since it has a negative right here in front of the x squared term, it's going to be facing downwards. So finding the maximum value is like finding the y value of the vertex, right? So basically what we would need to do is we would need to find what the vertex is. But all we want to know, since we want to know the maximum, is we want to know the y value right there. So let's go ahead and find the vertex. Let's see. The vertex, the x value would be negative b, so that's negative 10 over 2a, 2 times negative 10. Remember, a and b are both negative 10 here because there's a negative 10 there and a negative 10 there. That's equal to positive 10 over negative 20, which is equal to negative 1 over 2. So the x value is negative 1 over 2. In order to find the y value, we need to plug that in. So let me erase this down here. So I have a little bit more room. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the x value into the equation to find the y value to find the maximum. So let's go ahead and write out the equation. Y equals negative 10x squared minus 10x. Right? Now we're going to plug in a negative 1/2 for any x that we see. So let's erase the x's. There's one, and there's one. And we'll plug in a negative 1/2. Negative 1 over 2, and that's going to be squared. And also right here, negative 1 over 2, because there was an x right there. So let's see, negative 1/2 squared, remember do exponents first. That's going to give us positive 1 over 4. Negative 10 times positive 1/4 minus, let's see, a negative times a negative is actually a positive, and then 10 divided by 2. So let's go ahead and multiply these and see what we get. This gives us negative 10 over 4 plus, 10 divided by 2 is 5, right? So we have 10 over 4 plus 5. Well, if we want to make this out of 4 so that we can add them together, we would need to multiply the top and bottom by 4. So let's go ahead and change this so that it also ends with a 4th. If we want a 4th on the bottom, we would multiply that by 2. And if we want to do the same thing to the top to keep it equivalent. So this would be a 20 over 4. And then we can simplify at the end to make this easier. Negative 10 plus 20 is positive 10. 10 divided by 4. 10 can't divide by 4, but they are both even, so we can divide by 2. And we get 5 over 2. So the maximum value is 5 over 2. All right, hopefully this video helps. I'm reaching my time limit, so I'm going to stop it right here. And please comment on the topic if you have any questions. You can send me a Schoology message, or you can also reach me through the Remind app.